It was a chilly October morning when I found the letter waiting for me on the kitchen table. The envelope was plain and white, with no return address, no stamps, just my name written in an unfamiliar scrawl. I hadn't been expecting any mail like this, and the simplicity of it struck me as both odd and foreboding. I slid my finger under the flap and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, neatly folded. My heart raced as I unfolded it, and my eyes scanned the few lines written there. The message was brief and chillingly straightforward. David, your wife Melissa is staying at the Riverstone Hotel, room 312. She's not alone. A concerned friend. The words seemed to pulse on the page, each one driving a deeper wedge into my chest. My mind raced. Melissa had been acting strangely lately, distant and preoccupied. I had noticed the small signs, a missed call here, a vague excuse there, but I had convinced myself it was just stress from work or maybe a temporary bout of unhappiness. But now this letter, seemingly from a stranger, confirmed my worst fears. Room 312 at the Riverstone Hotel. The address was scrawled neatly at the bottom, and I could almost see it in my mind's eye. A dingy hotel room where secrets were kept hidden behind locked doors. I stared at the letter, my thoughts a chaotic mix of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. How did this anonymous sender know about Melissa and her supposed rendezvous? Was this some kind of cruel joke? My hands trembled slightly as I crumpled the letter, my mind set on one thing. I had to know the truth. Grabbing my coat and car keys, I headed for the door, my pulse pounding in my ears. The Riverstone Hotel was only a short drive away, but it felt like an eternity as I drove, each passing moment intensifying the dread building inside me. The crisp autumn air seemed to press down on me, heavy with the weight of anticipation and fear. As I pulled up to the hotel, I saw it for the first time, a rundown establishment with flickering neon lights and a tired-looking sign. It seemed out of place for the kind of luxury Melissa was used to, but it was still unsettling. I parked the car and took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I needed to approach this with calm, but the knot in my stomach told me that no amount of preparation could brace me for what I was about to uncover. With each step toward the entrance, my mind replayed memories of our life together, the moments of happiness now tainted by the ominous reality of what awaited me. The lobby of the hotel was as bleak as I had imagined, poorly lit and sparsely furnished. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with a weary look, eyed me curiously as I approached. "I need to know if room 312 is occupied," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She glanced at me with a mixture of suspicion and disinterest. "I'm afraid I can't give out that information." I took a deep breath, trying to hold back the surge of frustration. "Please, it's important. I just need to know if someone is staying there." She hesitated. Then, as if relenting to my earnestness or perhaps my desperation, she checked the registry. "Yes, room 312 is occupied," she finally said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Is there something specific you need?" I nodded, barely registering her question. My mind was already racing as I headed toward the elevators. My heart pounded in my chest as I rode up to the third floor. Each step down the hallway seemed to echo my anxiety, and I could barely contain the rush of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Finally, I stood in front of room 312, the number on the door taunting me with its presence. I raised my hand, my knuckles white from the force of my grip. For a moment I hesitated, but then the reality of what had brought me here settled in. I had to know. With a deep breath, I knocked on the door. The sound was oddly loud in the silence of the hallway. I waited each second, stretching into eternity, my heart racing faster with every passing moment. The silence that followed my knock felt unbearable. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The hallway seemed to close in on me, the oppressive weight of the unknown pressing against my chest. Finally, the door creaked open, and I was met with the startled face of a young woman I didn't recognize. She was dressed casually, her eyes widening in surprise at my sudden appearance. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice tinged with confusion. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "I'm looking for Melissa. Is she here?" The woman's face fell, a mix of pity and apprehension crossing her features. "Melissa, I don't know who you're talking about." Before I could react, the door behind her began to open further. I caught a glimpse of a figure moving in the shadows, and my heart sank as I recognized Melissa's voice, muffled but unmistakable. "David, what are you doing here?" I pushed past the woman, unable to contain my emotions any longer. The room was dimly lit, and there, sitting on the edge of the bed, was Melissa. She looked disheveled, her eyes wide with shock and guilt. "Melissa!" I shouted, my voice cracking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "How could you do this?" Melissa stood up, her face a mask of panic. "David, it's not what it looks like. Please, let me explain." I didn't know whether to scream or cry, my vision blurred with a mix of rage and sorrow. "Explain? Explain what? That you're here with another man? After everything we've been through?" Adam, the man from the letter, appeared from the bathroom, his face reddening as he realized the gravity of the situation. "I didn't know he was coming," he said awkwardly, his voice barely audible. I felt a surge of anger. "So you're the one who thought it was a good idea to keep my wife in this hotel?" Melissa took a step toward me, her voice trembling. "David, please. We need to talk about this. I made a terrible mistake, but it doesn't change how I feel about you." I shook my head, my mind spinning. "How could you think there was any chance of saving this? You've shattered my trust." Melissa's eyes filled with tears as she reached out, but I pulled back. "No, I need to think. I need to process this." I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear Melissa's cries of desperation behind me, but I couldn't bring myself to turn around. The pain was too raw, too overwhelming. I stumbled back into the hallway, my mind racing. The weight of the situation crashed over me, and I felt like I was walking in a fog. The woman who had answered the door looked at me with concern, but I barely registered her presence. The elevator ride down felt like an eternity. I stared at the reflection of my distraught face in the metal doors, my thoughts a chaotic whirlwind of betrayal and hurt. As I stepped out into the lobby, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone, realizing I needed to take action. The anger and pain were consuming me, and I knew I had to do something to make her understand the gravity of what she'd done. As I drove back home, my thoughts were already turning to how I would make her feel the same sting of betrayal that I was feeling. The plan began to form in my mind, a way to retaliate, to hurt her in the way she had hurt me. The road ahead seemed dark and uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let this betrayal go unanswered. As I pulled into my driveway, the house that once felt like a sanctuary now seemed like a cruel reminder of the life I thought I had. The comforting familiarity of our home was overshadowed by the burning anger and betrayal that consumed me. I stepped inside, tossing my keys onto the table, my mind racing with the plan I had started to form. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Melissa needed to understand the full impact of her actions, and I needed to make her feel the same sting I was experiencing. I headed to the garage, where Melissa's car was parked. It was a sleek, shiny vehicle that she'd always taken pride in. My hands shook as I grabbed a screwdriver from the tool bench. The idea of what I was about to do made my stomach churn, but the anger was overwhelming. I approached the car with deliberate steps. My first move was to smash the headlights. I struck them with the back of the screwdriver, each crack resonating through the quiet night. The shattering glass seemed to echo my internal chaos, a physical manifestation of my emotional turmoil. Next, I turned my attention to the side mirrors. I pried them off, snapping the plastic with a grim sense of satisfaction. It was petty, but it was the least I could do to start addressing the pain she had caused me. As I worked, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts about the broken trust, the shattered dreams, and the emptiness left in the wake of her betrayal. The car, once a symbol of our shared successes, now represented the rift that had opened between us. With the car sufficiently damaged, I moved on to the next phase of my plan. I knew Melissa had a collection of expensive, cherished clothes, items she'd shown off with pride and told me about in countless conversations. They were stored in her walk-in closet, and I had an idea of how to deal with them. I went upstairs to our bedroom, my heart pounding as I opened the closet door. Her clothes were neatly hung, each piece a testament to her taste and style. I pulled out several items, carefully selecting her favorite dresses and outfits. With a grim determination, I gathered them up and took them to the laundry room. I'd already prepared a bottle of laundry detergent mixed with fabric dye. a concoction I had read about online. The dye was known for ruining the fabric, and that was precisely what I intended. I tossed the clothes into the washing machine, watching as they tumbled into the detergent and dye mixture. I set the machine to run a full cycle, knowing that the damage would be irreversible. The thought of her seeing her beloved clothes ruined filled me with a twisted sense of satisfaction. As the machine rumbled away, I sat on the edge of the laundry room, my thoughts still consumed by anger. What I was doing was extreme, but the betrayal I felt was equally extreme. I needed her to understand that actions have consequences, and maybe, just maybe, this would drive home the point. After what felt like hours, the cycle finally ended. I opened the washing machine and pulled out the clothes, now stained and discolored. The once vibrant fabrics were now a patchwork of ruined hues, a stark contrast to their original beauty. I carefully hung them up to dry, making sure they were visible and unmistakable. The sight of them, now wrecked and worthless, was a bitter reminder of the extent of my pain. As I looked around the now damaged car and ruined clothes, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The immediate surge of anger had been addressed, but I knew that this was just the beginning of a long and painful journey. The night stretched on, and I found myself unable to sleep. My mind replayed the scene at the hotel, the look of shock on Melissa's face, and the hollow feeling of betrayal. I had taken my revenge, but I was still left with the aftermath, the emotional wreckage that would take much longer to heal. Tomorrow would be a new day, and with it would come the challenge of facing Melissa and dealing with the fallout of my actions. For now, though, I let the silence of the night envelop me, trying to come to terms with the path I had chosen. Morning arrived with a cold light that did little to warm the bitterness I felt. As I walked downstairs, the remnants of the previous night's actions greeted me, a damaged car and a collection of ruined clothes. The sight of them was a stark reminder of the pain and anger that drove me to such measures. The sound of the front door opening pulled me out of my thoughts. Melissa's voice carried through the house, filled with an urgent desperation that was impossible to ignore. "David, are you here?" she called, her voice strained. "We need to talk." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation that was about to unfold. I had no intention of making it easy for her. After everything, she needed to face the consequences of her actions. I walked into the foyer, where Melissa stood, her face pale and eyes red from crying. She looked disheveled, clearly distressed by the sight of her damaged car and the mess in the laundry room. "David, what have you done?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why would you do this?" I met her gaze with a cold expression. "You should know better than anyone why I did this. You betrayed me, Melissa. You shattered our trust, and now I'm paying the price for it." Melissa's eyes filled with tears as she took a step toward me. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake, and I regret it more than you can imagine." Her words were laced with desperation, but they did little to change the reality of what had happened. I felt a pang of sympathy, but it was buried under layers of anger and hurt. "You think saying sorry is going to fix this?" I snapped. "You think you can just waltz back into my life and act like nothing happened?" "I don't know how to make it right," she said, her voice breaking. "But I want to try. I want to fix what's broken between us." I shook my head, feeling the weight of her words but struggling to find a way forward. "Fixing it won't be as simple as a few apologies. You've hurt me deeply, and I need time to process everything." Melissa's shoulders slumped as she looked around at the wreckage. "What can I do to make this right? Tell me, David. I want to do whatever it takes." I sighed, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "I need space to think. I need to figure out if I can ever trust you again." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Okay, I understand. Just please know that I'm truly sorry, and I'll do whatever it takes to prove it." With that, Melissa turned and left, leaving me alone with the remnants of my anger and the mess I'd created. The silence that followed her departure was deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous night. I spent the day trying to come to terms with what had happened. The damage to the car and the ruined clothes were now just symbols of a deeper, more painful betrayal. As I walked through the house, I saw the fragments of our life together in a new light, each item a reminder of the trust that had been broken. By the evening, I had decided to confront Melissa with a plan. I knew that repairing our relationship would be a long and difficult process, but I needed to establish boundaries and communicate the gravity of the situation. As I prepared for the conversation, I felt a mixture of resolve and uncertainty. I knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but I was determined to navigate it with honesty and clarity. When Melissa arrived later that evening, she looked more composed but still anxious. We sat down at the dining table, the scene of countless shared meals, now a backdrop for an important conversation. "Melissa," I began, "I want to be clear about what's next. We can't just sweep this under the rug. We need to address the issues that led to this point and work on rebuilding trust." She nodded, her eyes fixed on me. "I understand. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I know that actions speak louder than words, and I'm prepared to show you that I can change." I took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of hope and skepticism. "We'll start with counseling, and we'll need to take it one step at a time. I can't promise that everything will go back to how it was, but we need to try." Melissa reached out and took my hand, her grip firm but filled with emotion. "Thank you for giving us a chance. I'll do everything I can to make things right." As we began to discuss the steps forward, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope amidst the pain. The road to healing would be long and uncertain, but for now, we were both committed to trying to mend what had been broken. The days following our confrontation were a blur of emotions. Each morning, I faced the daunting task of reconciling the reality of Melissa's betrayal with the hope of rebuilding our relationship. The house felt emptier, filled with the echoes of our previous conversations, now tainted by the recent events. One evening we sat down together for the first time since our last heated discussion. The air was heavy with unspoken words and lingering hurt. We had decided to begin counseling, but before we could dive into that, we needed to have a heart-to-heart conversation. I could see the anxiety in Melissa's eyes as she sat across from me at the kitchen table, the remnants of our earlier shared life scattered around us. Pictures, mementos, and even the last of her once beloved clothes that now lay forgotten in a corner. "David, I know things have been really difficult," Melissa started, her voice tentative. "But I want to understand how we got here and what we need to do to fix it." I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Melissa, I'm still struggling to make sense of everything. I need to hear from you. Why did this happen? What was going through your mind?" Melissa took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "It wasn't just one thing. I felt like something was missing for a while. I was unhappy. And instead of talking to you about it, I made a terrible mistake. I thought I could find something to fill the void, but I only ended up hurting us both." Her words were raw, and I could see the remorse in her eyes. But even with her apology, the pain lingered. "Melissa, I trusted you completely. The fact that you sought comfort elsewhere is a betrayal I can't easily overlook." "I know," she said, tears welling up. "I never meant to hurt you. I was selfish and confused, and I should have been honest with you instead of hiding behind lies." The conversation was painful, each word a reminder of the trust that had been shattered. But as we spoke, I tried to focus on the path forward. "We need to work on communication, Melissa. We've always had issues with it, but now it's more important than ever. If we're going to rebuild this, we need to be honest with each other about everything." Melissa nodded vigorously. "I agree. I want us to be able to talk about our problems openly. I know it won't be easy, but I'm committed to doing whatever it takes." We spent the next few hours discussing our feelings, our fears, and our hopes for the future. It was a raw and emotional exchange, but it was necessary. We needed to lay everything out on the table and confront the issues that had led to this point. The discussion also turned to the counseling sessions we'd scheduled. I knew they would be crucial in helping us navigate our way through the wreckage of our relationship. "I think starting therapy will help us understand each other better," I said. "It'll be a place where we can both express our feelings and work on rebuilding trust." Melissa looked at me with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "I'm ready to start. I know it's going to be a long process, but I believe we can get through this if we both commit to it." And as the evening drew to a close, we shared a quiet moment together, both of us reflecting on the gravity of what lay ahead. The road to healing was uncertain and fraught with challenges, but for the first time since the betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope. The journey we were about to embark on would test our commitment and patience, but it was a step toward addressing the deep issues that had led to the betrayal. And despite the pain, I knew that if we were to salvage our relationship, it would be through understanding, effort, and the willingness to confront our problems head-on. As I looked at Melissa, I saw a woman who was genuinely remorseful and determined to make things right. It gave me a sliver of hope that perhaps, with time and effort, we could rebuild what had been lost. The first counseling session was set for the following week, and both Melissa and I approached it with a mixture of apprehension and hope. We had agreed that it was an essential step in our journey to healing, but neither of us knew exactly what to expect. On the day of the session, I arrived at the therapist's office early, taking the opportunity to collect my thoughts before Melissa arrived. The waiting room was calm, decorated in soothing colors, and filled with comfortable chairs. It was meant to be a place of calm and reflection, but my mind was racing with doubts and fears. When Melissa walked in, she looked equally nervous. We exchanged brief, strained smiles before being called into the therapist's office. Dr. Jessica Hayes, our counselor, greeted us warmly. She was a woman in her mid-40s, with a calming presence and an empathetic demeanor. Her office was a welcoming space, with soft lighting and comfortable seating, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions we carried with us. "Hello, David and Melissa," she said as we took our seats. "I'm glad you're both here. This is a safe space for us to explore your feelings and work on rebuilding your relationship. How are you both feeling today?" Melissa spoke first, her voice wavering. "Nervous but hopeful. I want to make things right, but I'm afraid of where this will lead." Dr. Hayes nodded understandingly. "It's natural to feel that way. Starting therapy is a significant step, and it's important to acknowledge your feelings. David, how about you?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I'm apprehensive. I want to move forward, but I'm still dealing with a lot of pain and anger." "Thank you for sharing," Dr. Hayes said. "It's important for me to understand where you both are emotionally. Our goal here is to help you navigate through these emotions and work towards understanding each other better." The session began with Dr. Hayes guiding us through a series of questions designed to help us articulate our feelings and the issues that had led to our current situation. She encouraged us to be honest, but also reminded us to approach the conversation with empathy. Melissa spoke about her feelings of dissatisfaction and how she had struggled with communicating them to me. "I felt disconnected for a while," she admitted, "but instead of talking to David, I made a terrible choice. I didn't know how to handle my emotions, and I regret it deeply." I listened, trying to absorb her perspective while battling the lingering pain. "I appreciate your honesty, but it doesn't change the fact that you broke my trust. I'm trying to understand why, but it's hard to move past the hurt," Dr. Hayes interjected gently. "David, it's important to recognize that Melissa's actions, though painful, were a result of underlying issues that were not addressed. This process is about uncovering those issues and finding a way to address them together." The session continued with Dr. Hayes guiding us through exercises designed to improve communication. We practiced expressing our feelings without placing blame, focusing on I statements rather than you statements. It was challenging, but eye-opening. "Melissa," Dr. Hayes said, "when you feel disconnected, how can you communicate that to David in a way that fosters understanding rather than conflict?" Melissa thought for a moment. "I need to be more open about my feelings, even if it's uncomfortable. I realize now that keeping things bottled up only made the situation worse." "And David," Dr. Hayes continued, "when you hear Melissa express her feelings, how can you respond in a way that supports her rather than escalating the situation?" I reflected on this. I need to listen more actively and try to understand her perspective without immediately reacting out of anger or hurt. The exercises were difficult, but they provided a framework for us to start rebuilding our communication. We ended the session with a sense of tentative hope, both of us acknowledging that there was much work to be done, but feeling slightly more equipped to tackle the challenges ahead. As we left the therapist's office, Melissa reached out and took my hand. "Thank you for coming with me. I know this won't be easy, but I'm glad we're taking this step." I squeezed her hand, feeling a mix of hope and skepticism. "I'm willing to try, Melissa. We have a long road ahead, but I'm committed to working through this with you." The days that followed were filled with continued counseling sessions and honest conversations. Each session brought its own set of challenges, but it also provided moments of clarity and understanding. We were learning to navigate our way through the emotional wreckage and to communicate in a more constructive way. The journey was far from over, but with each step, We were slowly building a foundation for healing. It was clear that there would be many more obstacles along the way, but the commitment to confronting our issues head-on gave me a glimmer of hope for the future. As the weeks passed, Melissa and I continued with our counseling sessions, each one a small but significant step in the process of healing. Our discussions were often intense and emotional, but they were helping us address the deep-seated issues that had contributed to the betrayal. The road to rebuilding trust was long and fraught with challenges. Each day we faced the task of slowly reassembling the pieces of our relationship, trying to find a way back to some semblance of normalcy. It was exhausting, but there were moments of clarity and connection that made the effort worthwhile. One evening, after a particularly grueling counseling session, Melissa and I decided to have a quiet night at home. We cooked dinner together, a simple pasta dish that had been a favorite of ours. As we worked side by side in the kitchen, I realized how much I had missed these mundane, everyday moments with her. "I never thought I'd appreciate cooking pasta so much," Melissa said with a small, tentative smile. "It feels good to do something normal." I chuckled softly. "Yeah, it does. It's a reminder of the small things that matter." We ate dinner at the kitchen table, a far cry from our usual routine, but a step toward finding our rhythm again. The conversation was light, but beneath the surface, there was an unspoken understanding that we were both working hard to mend what had been broken. After dinner, we decided to take a walk in the nearby park, a place where we had often gone to unwind. The evening air was cool and refreshing, and as we strolled along the path, I felt a sense of tentative optimism. Melissa broke the silence, her voice soft. "David, I know it's going to take time, but I want you to know that I'm committed to making this work. I've realized how important our relationship is and how much I need to fight for it." I glanced at her, my heart aching with a mixture of hope and skepticism. "I want to believe that we can rebuild what we had, Melissa, but trust doesn't come back overnight. It's going to take a lot of work and patience." She nodded, her expression earnest. "I understand. I'm prepared for that. I know I've broken your trust, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn it back. I just hope we can find our way through this." We continued walking in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The park was peaceful, the distant sounds of children playing, and the gentle rustling of leaves creating a soothing backdrop. It was a brief respite from the emotional turmoil we had been facing. As we approached a quiet bench, I decided to address a topic that had been weighing on my mind. "Melissa, what do you think we can do to rebuild trust? What steps can we take to ensure we're moving in the right direction?" Melissa took a deep breath, thinking carefully. "I think we need to be more transparent with each other. That means sharing our feelings openly and being honest about our concerns. We also need to set clear boundaries and respect each other's needs." I nodded in agreement. "Yes, and we should also continue with our counseling. It's helping us understand each other better and work through our issues. It's not a quick fix, but it's an important part of the process." Melissa smiled faintly. "Agreed. And I think we should also find ways to reconnect on a deeper level. Maybe we can start doing some of the things we used to enjoy together, just to remind ourselves of the bond we share." The idea of reconnecting through shared activities felt like a positive step forward. We decided to make a conscious effort to rekindle the aspects of our relationship that had been overshadowed by recent events. The following days were filled with small but meaningful efforts to rebuild our relationship. We started planning regular date nights, revisiting old hobbies, and finding ways to communicate more effectively. It was a slow and often difficult process, but each positive interaction helped to heal some of the wounds. Trust was gradually being rebuilt, one small act of kindness at a time. We were learning to navigate the complexities of our emotions and to support each other through the challenges. There were still moments of doubt and struggle, but there were also moments of genuine connection and growth. As we continued on this journey, it became clear that rebuilding trust was not just about repairing what had been broken, but also about creating a stronger and more resilient relationship. We were both committed to making it work, and despite the obstacles, there was a growing sense of hope that perhaps, in time, we could emerge from this experience stronger and more connected than ever before. Weeks turned into months, and as the days passed, Melissa and I continued to navigate the turbulent waters of our relationship. The counseling sessions were a regular fixture in our lives, and we worked diligently to apply the lessons we learned in our daily interactions. The progress was slow, but there were glimmers of hope that kept us moving forward. One Saturday afternoon, we decided to take a trip to the lake house we used to visit often. It was a place filled with fond memories, and we hoped that returning there might help us reconnect on a deeper level. The drive was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts, but there was an underlying sense of anticipation. As we arrived at the lake house, the familiar sight of the serene water and the surrounding trees offered a calming contrast to the emotional turbulence we had been experiencing. The house was just as we remembered it, rustic and cozy, with a charm that made it feel like a retreat from the world. We unpacked our things and decided to take a walk along the lake. The weather was perfect, sunshine filtering through the trees, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. It was the kind of day that felt ripe for reflection and renewal. As we walked along the water's edge, the conversation started to flow more easily. We talked about our hopes for the future and the steps we needed to take to ensure our relationship remained on the right path. It was a welcome change from the intense emotional discussions we had grown accustomed to. "David," Melissa said, her voice filled with a mix of vulnerability and determination, "I've been thinking a lot about our future. I know it won't be easy, but I'm committed to making things work. I want us to have a fresh start, even though I know that trust has to be rebuilt slowly." I looked at her, feeling a sense of calm and connection that had been elusive in recent months. "I appreciate your commitment, Melissa. I'm trying to be open to the idea of a fresh start, too. It's difficult, but I'm willing to work through it with you." We continued our walk in thoughtful silence, taking in the beauty of our surroundings. As we reached a quiet spot by the lake, we sat down on a wooden bench, the sun casting a warm glow over the water. It was a moment of peaceful reflection, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the time we were sharing. Melissa turned to me with a serious expression. "David, I know there are still things we need to work on, but I want to ask if you're starting to see any progress. Do you feel like we're moving in the right direction?" I took a deep breath, considering her question carefully. "I do see progress, Melissa. It's slow and often difficult, but I think we're moving in the right direction. The effort we're both putting in is making a difference, even if it doesn't always feel that way." Melissa smiled, her eyes reflecting a glimmer of hope. "I'm glad to hear that. I know it's not going to be an overnight fix, but I believe we're making strides. I want us to continue working on our relationship and to keep finding ways to strengthen our bond." As the afternoon turned to evening, we decided to have a quiet dinner on the porch, enjoying the tranquility of the lake. The meal was simple but delicious, and as we ate, we talked about our plans for the future, dreams, goals, and aspirations that extended beyond the recent turmoil. The conversation was filled with hope and optimism, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of renewed connection with Melissa. It was as though the struggles we had faced were beginning to forge a new and stronger bond between us. As the sun set over the lake, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I realized that this trip had been a turning point for us. It was a moment of clarity and renewal, a chance to step back from the daily grind and reassess our relationship from a place of peace. Melissa and I had a long way to go, but the progress we had made and the moments of genuine connection were encouraging. The journey of rebuilding trust was far from over, but the turning point we had reached provided a sense of hope and a renewed commitment to each other. As we sat together, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the night sky, I felt a cautious optimism about our future. We were learning to navigate our way through the challenges and to build a stronger foundation for our relationship. And despite the difficulties, I believed that we had the potential to emerge from this experience with a deeper understanding and a more resilient bond. A year had passed since that pivotal trip to the lake house, a year filled with challenges, growth, and incremental healing. As I looked back on the journey Melissa and I had undertaken, I couldn't help but marvel at how far we had come. The pain of betrayal had not disappeared completely, but it had transformed into a more manageable, if still sensitive, part of our shared history. It was a crisp morning in late summer, and the sunlight streamed through the windows of our home, casting a warm glow over the room. Melissa and I were in the kitchen, preparing breakfast together, a routine that had become a cherished part of our daily life. The kitchen, once a place of tension, now felt like the heart of our renewed connection. "Do you remember this time last year?" Melissa asked, her voice filled with a gentle nostalgia. We were just beginning to find our way back to each other. I glanced over at her, appreciating the way our relationship had evolved over the months. I do. It feels like a lifetime ago, but in a good way. We've come so far. Melissa smiled, her eyes reflecting a sense of contentment. It hasn't always been easy, but I'm grateful for the progress we've made. It's been a lot of hard work, but it's been worth it. Our morning routine was a testament to the growth we had experienced. We talked easily, laughed often, and worked together to make our days as meaningful as possible. It was a stark contrast to the strained interactions of the past. After breakfast, we decided to spend the day visiting the park near our home, a favorite spot where we often went to enjoy the simple pleasures of life. As we walked along the familiar paths, I reflected on the changes we had made. The counseling sessions had been a critical part of our healing process, providing us with tools and insights to improve our communication and understanding. We had also made an effort to reconnect with activities that brought us joy, from cooking together to exploring new hobbies. These efforts, though small in isolation, had collectively strengthened our relationship. At the park, we found a quiet spot under a large oak tree and sat down on a bench, enjoying the tranquility of the surroundings. Melissa took my hand and squeezed it gently, a gesture that had become a symbol of our renewed bond. David, she began, her voice sincere, I want to thank you for everything you've done over the past year. Your willingness to work through our issues and to keep moving forward has meant so much to me. I looked at her, feeling a deep sense of appreciation. Melissa, I need to thank you too. Your commitment to our relationship and your efforts to rebuild trust have been incredible. It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth every step. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, simply enjoying each other's company and the peacefulness of the park. It was a moment of reflection and gratitude, a chance to acknowledge the progress we had made and the future we were building together. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the park, I realized how far we had come. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been transformative. We had faced the pain of betrayal and worked through it with honesty, commitment, and a shared desire to move forward. Melissa and I had learned that rebuilding trust was not just about fixing what had been broken, but also about creating a stronger, more resilient relationship. We had discovered new depths of understanding and connection, and we were committed to continuing our journey together. As we walked back home, hand in hand, I felt a renewed sense of hope and optimism for the future. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, but the strength we had gained and the love we had nurtured gave me confidence that we could face whatever came our way. Our relationship had been tested, but it had emerged stronger and more meaningful. As we looked forward to the future, I knew that with continued effort, love, and commitment, we had the foundation to build a life filled with genuine connection and enduring trust.